Hello. This is a story I was going to record for the Halloween season, but life got in the way and I ran out of time. However, at the moment, I've been up to date to visit a friend who is in hospital and hopefully on the road to recovery. And got home. It's a cold night. I have a raging log fire. I have ginger wine. And I have a small dog sitting behind me and a larger lump of a dog over there. And I'm feeling a bit more content now than I have for a few days with rushing around from one thing to another. So I'm going to record the story now that I would have done for Halloween had things not been quite so hectic. Ilya had come home from the wars, come home to visit his old army friends, the ones who had been invalided out in the battles that had raged for many a long year. And he came to visit one particular friend, Grigorovich. And Grigorovich was a learned man. He had gone into the army because his family had insisted upon it, though he himself was perhaps better suited to a different style of life, a more sedentary style of life, perhaps the life of a scholar or a librarian, for with the payment he had received from his years of service in the army, becoming a high-ranking officer, much of it, along with his family wealth, had been spent on restocking the library that had once been started by his great-great-grandfather, but which had dwindled over the years through neglect. He had bought many and many and many a tome, and when Ilya came to visit him, they naturally fell into conversation over a glass of vodka to discuss the latest books, the latest acquisitions, for Ilya himself was a man of considerable intellect. And after they'd necked a bottle or three of vodka and some fine cheese and some good bread and some sausage, Grigorovich said he was tired and going to bed, but Ilya wanted to sit up a little longer and said to his friend, "Do you mind if I stay in the library, if I sit and I read and I enjoy the books?" And Grigorovich said, "Oh, feel free, you are my guest, my honoured guest. Read all the books you want, but I beg of you, read quietly." And with that slightly strange comment, Grigorovich went to bed and left Ilya sitting in the great winged back chair in the library, a fire roaring away. We found book after book after book upon the shelves. Books on foreign countries, books on strange and ancient languages, books on religions long since thought dead, books on kings and queens, on warriors and inventors, books on almost every subject under the sun, until in the wee small hours of the morning, with but a couple of hours to go until dawn, he came across, right at the back of the library, on a high shelf, on the highest shelf of that particular dusty old book cabinet, a very large book, a book with the most ornate cover and a lock for which there was no obvious key. But Ilya, in his misspent youth, had been a lad not disinclined to pick up unsavoury skills and traits from the dissolute crowd with which he hung out, including a certain ability to pick a lock taught to him by some rather racy young lady with her hairpin. And whilst Ilya himself wore no hairpins, he did keep one always in his pocket just in case, and he sat in that wing-back chair and he fiddled with the lock, keen to know what kind of book was it with so ornate a cover, so bejewelled a cover that required being locked up in the first place. And after a few minutes of twiddling and fiddling, bing, the lock opened. And Ilya went from page to page, and at first was somewhat bewildered. He scurried through to the midway section and then flicked to the back, skim reading, and the whole book was much of a muchness. It wasn't a novel, it was not a history, it was not a a geography. It was not a book of science or chemistry or religion or any subject he could identify. It was simply a long list of names, page after page of very strange names and titles of, well, of what? He didn't quite know. They did not seem to be the names of people, famous figures of history, or possibly not relatives of his host, for none of them bore the same surname, or indeed any kind of a surname in most cases. It was simply a long list of names and rather strange titles. And he wondered why would anyone write such a book, and more to the point, why would anyone put a lock on such a dull and frankly uninteresting book. And a few vodkas to the wind by this point in time, his friend's advice had somewhat slipped his memory, the recommendation to read quietly. And he sat and he read the first name, Belphegor. What a strange name, he thought. Belphegor. And he said it out loud, Belphegor. And then he went on to the next name, Stanzibras. What an odd sounding name. Stanzibras, Lord of Chaos. And then the next, Belkezadar, Prince of the Outer Realms. How odd. Belkezadar, Prince of the Outer Realms. Who on earth was this Prince Belkezadar, he wondered to himself. And on he went, reading all of the names on the first page, and then turning the great, ornately scripted page to the next, and reading all of the names upon that page. And it was only when the candle started to flicker a little, and he wondered if there was perhaps a draught, and maybe the candle would need replacing soon, that he looked up and he noticed that he was no longer alone in the library. To the left of him, to the right of him, before him, and he could feel from the tingling hairs on the back of his neck behind him, were beings. Hideous beings. Tall beings and short beings. Hugely fat beings and emaciatedly thin beings. Beings with horns and with claws and with cloven hooves. Beings with wings and with tails. Monstrously ugly beings of every shape and size and permutation. Beings with bone white skin, and beings with ebony black skin, and beings with green skin, and beings who were as yellow as the sands upon the beach, and others that were purple and red, and some striped and some spotted and some multicoloured, some furry and some scaly, some feathered, and some seemingly composed from blubbery, rubbery material, the like of which he could not begin to describe. And shaking with terror. For all of the horrors he had seen upon the battlefield, nothing had prepared him for this. Shaking with terror, he said, Who are you? And a voice from the back of an enormously blubbersome beast said, I am Belphegor, whom you have called up. And one by one, each of the creatures gave its name, a name he had read from the pages of the recently locked book. And at last, of course, he realised, for he was an educated man, the nature of the book he had been foolishly reading from, reading aloud. You must give us, said the creatures in unison. You must give us tasks to do. For you have summoned us, and you must have summoned us for a reason. If we are not given tasks to do, then we shall take you back down below, and you will be taken to task. Well, he panicked. He thought, what can I say? Measure the tallest tower in the town, and come back and tell me what it is. And at once a legion of monstrous beings vanished like smoke upon the wind, and he breathed a huge sigh of relief and stood ready to put the book back upon the shelf when they reappeared. Scarcely 2 minutes had passed when every single one of these monstrous demonic entities manifested itself back into the room, and they said in unison, "It is 127 feet and 4 inches tall. Give us another task, or we shall take you to task." And Ilya thought, what can I do that would take them more time than measuring the tower? And the beast said, "Quickly, quickly, do not delay, or we shall take you down." And he thought to himself, "I want you to go to the great lake that is outside the city and empty it with a sieve, and then refill it again, still with a sieve." And at once they disappeared. And he thought to himself, it will take them hours upon hours upon hours to do such a task, if they can ever accomplish it at all with sieves. I have time enough to pack my bags and flee. And he had only just got to the door handle of the library, which he was about to turn and go upstairs and pack his bags, scarcely 3 minutes since he had sent them off upon this perverse task, when the room filled once again with demons, and they said, "We have emptied the great lake with sieves, and we have refilled the great lake with sieves. Give us another task." Let me think. You could... I know, I have it. You could go to the great castle that sits upon the mountaintop overlooking the village. And there I want you to dismantle the entire castle, every brick, every timber, take them out from where they are and polish them and dust them, and then reassemble the castle so that no difference can be told from how it was beforehand. And the demons, the legion of monsters, disappeared. And this time he made it to the end of the corridor, when the legion of demons reappeared, and he could hear them screeching and scurrying in the library at the other end of the corridor, and the door of the library burst open, and they came rushing down, and they grabbed him with claws and with tentacles and with pincers, and they hauled him back into the library and said, "You must not go from here. Do so again, and we will grasp, and we will snip, and we will claw, and we will bite, and we will rip, and we will tear, and we will gouge, and we will glut ourselves upon you. Now, give us another task, or we will take you to task." And he thought, "I want you to go to the great river that feeds into the lake." They said, "You cannot tell us to empty it with a sieve, for you may not give the same task a second time." No, said Ilya. "No sieves this time. I want you to go to that great river, and I want you to count every grain of sand upon the bed of the great river. And I want you to count every fish in that river, and I want you to count every frog in that river, and I want you to count every otter in that river, and come back and tell me how much sand and how many fish and how many frogs and how many otters there are." And off they went. And he thought to himself, "I can't leave this room, or they will gouge and rip and tear me. Whether they're gone 10 minutes or 5 minutes, what can I do? What can I do? And he looked at the great-grandfather clock, and he saw that there was half an hour till dawn. And from what little he knew of demons, he thought it unlikely that they would stay in the daylight. If only he could occupy them with tasks to keep them going until the sun should rise in dawn and its light enter in through the eastern window of the library, perhaps the monsters would be dissipated back to hell from which he had so foolishly and unintentionally summoned them. Well, scarcely 5 minutes passed when the demons came back and they told him how many millions of grains of sand there were upon the riverbed. They told him how many fish in the river, how many frogs in the river, how many otters in the river, down to the last baby otter, they told him. Now, give us another task. And Ilya said, well, I have a task in mind, but it is so massive a task, so mighty a task, that I fear there are not enough of you in the room. And he looked at the 20 demons that were in the room, and they all looked at each other as if to say, what task could there possibly be in the world that 20 demons cannot accomplish? I must read more names from the book to bring up more demons to help you accomplish this task. Very well, read from the book, said the demons in unison. And he slowly, milking it for every second he could get, sat in the great chair, poured himself another vodka, relit extra candles, for the existing candles were guttering low and he did not want to be in the darkness with these creatures. Candlelight was bad enough. And he said, will you sit quietly whilst I read from the book? Yes, yes, said the demons, we will sit quietly whilst you read from the book. Do you promise, by whatever oaths you creatures swear by, that you will sit quietly? You will not interfere, you will not shout or scream or cause any problems. You will allow me to read from the book. Yes, yes, said the demons, we swear by Satan's golden hooves that we will sit in silence and we will not interfere whilst you read from the book. Read from the book. Who else can you summon? Who else? Well, Ilya flicked through the pages to find the page where he had finished reading. At that moment when he'd looked up and seen a room full of demons. And he began to read the name that he had last read. Mammon, Lord of Greed and Avarice. And as he said the name, the last name that he had said, Mammon himself, dripping with gold and rubies and diamonds, swivel-eyed and grasping and greedy, disappeared in a puff of smoke. And the rest of the demons hissed and chattered and realised they had been tricked, but they could say nothing. They could say nothing, for they had sworn by Satan's golden hooves that they would sit in silence. And he read the next name and the next and the next, and one by one, the demons in the room who had been called up were sent back as their names were read a second time, and back they went down to the pits of hell, until the last name he read, just as the dawn light was coming through the eastern window of the library, he read it, and the demon, as its name echoed, clawed at him, scraped 3 great gouts down the side of his face as it dissipated into nothingness, for it was no longer interfering, for its name had been read, and its oath was over. And so Ilya saved his soul at the split second of dawn, but had the scars upon his face as a constant reminder for the rest of his life to follow the advice of his hosts, and to be very, very careful which books he read and whose names he called upon. And a wise and happy life he had, following that advice. Thank you.